Hello friends, welcome back again. We have been examining various facets of our Indic civilization. Let's also examine some more blunders that may have been or would have been committed in the understanding of our history. And today we will dwell on the topic of Ashoka the Great. Now, the title of great has been given to him by the standards of modern civilization. Not that we as Indics have any problem with it really, but yes, as per Indic standards, for someone who waged a war, having indulged in large-scale killings and probably killed a brother or two of his, is not necessarily considered great, even though he may have spread the message of peace for 30 odd years after that during his reign. Nevertheless, let's examine about Ashoka the Great and what is his story. As far as we know in our history, we know that Ashoka the Great belongs to the Mauryan dynasty. He was somewhere around Alexander's time, soon after him, somewhere about roughly 300 odd years before Christ. And his capital was at Patliputra, which is modern day Patna. And the fact that by the time he had come to the throne, already the Mauryan Empire was covering all the way from Afghanistan in the west to Bengal in the east and then to Tamil Nadu in the south, and of course Himalayas being the borders. So yes, so this was the massive landmass that was under the Mauryan Empire. What was only left was a small pocket called Kalinga, which is somewhat roughly the modern day Odisha today in India. So this was his kingdom, but then he still wanted Kalinga kingdom too. So he waged a war in the 8th year of his reign and annexed Kalinga to his kingdom. But in the process, there was massive killings. More than 100,000 people were killed, a lot of them taken prisoners and whatnot. So looking at the death and destruction, it moved Ashoka so much that he immediately took on to Buddhism and then started spreading the message of peace throughout his land, or to the length and breadth of his land. And his message of peace is transmitted through edicts, something like there are 14 major edicts, rock edicts on rock inscriptions in which he has written, and then he ruled for roughly 30 odd years after that. And that is what we more or less know about Ashoka. But now look, when we talk of history, what we have to do is we got to look for certain archaeological evidences that we try to find out. Then we try to see what is the people's public memory, folklores, legends. You try and sift through those things to see something there. And then you look at a lot of textual references, references made through books, stories, narratives, written histories and accounts and details, travelogues, whatever is available from that time onwards, later on onwards. And with all of that, you put together a piece of story, which is probably his story. And that's supposed to be the history. Now, let's examine here if this job was well done, because there are a few problems. For example, what we find is that as per our Puranas, which have been totally neglected. Now, Puranas is another great textual records available, but then the historians don't consider it because for some reason they could not, interpret the Puranas correctly. So they dismiss this at more or less as mythological. And yet the Puranas mention of Ashoka's capital as being Rajagriha, which is modern day Rajgir. Rajagriha was the capital during Buddha times also, and we are aware, which was pre-Ashoka. And Rajagriha is, during those times, in Buddha times itself, it was described as a city that had 6,000 to 7,000 public parks and gardens. Imagine 6,000 public parks. That was a beauty. It was supposed to be a beautiful city. That happened to be the capital of the Mauryas. And the fact that the Mauryan capital became Patliputra is actually later, though based upon this, they attribute the shift of the capital to somebody in the pre-Ashokan time. Okay, be that as it may, we will look at it, because the capital of Magadha or capital Patliputra was actually started by the Guptas. Actually, it was a different king who started it there. At that time, it was a very small settlement. It came into its splendor under the Gupta kingdoms. This is what mostly we get to know from the Puranas and other accounts. But the modern mainstream historians will try to put it differently. Then we must also notice that, you find a lot of stupas. You see a lot of stupas all around, and you find that there are rock edicts, but none of the rock edicts are at the sites of the stupas. The rock edicts are the rock edicts where they are, and the stupas are where they are. Stupa is a Buddhist, can't call it place of worship, but it's a Buddhist equivalent of a temple or whatever. Only thing, it is much more simpler to build unless you're building a real intricate stupa, because a stupa essentially is a mound, a dome, within which if you see there's nothing, it's actually nothing, or it's just rubble. So there's no entrance into the dome. All you have is steps around it and up it, and then that's the stupa. Essentially meaning the philosophy of Buddhism that, in the end it's nothingness. So that's why a stupa is built upon rubble and nothingness. So that's the stupa. And there are no inscriptions on any stupas. I mean, he wrote so many rock edict inscriptions. Why weren't there inscriptions around the stupas? On the stupas, there are none. No inscriptions there. And then to also look at it, you see the Buddhist texts, all the dated old texts, etc., they do mention of an Ashoka, but then they talk of an Ashoka who built 84,000 stupas. Yes, we have found many, but not 84,000. But yes, every other day when they excavate, they do find stupas. So it is possible that there were actually 84,000 stupas built, and they showed him as a devout Buddhist. But they do not boast anywhere, because you see, at a later period, there was quite a stiff competition between Buddhism and Hinduism for the mind share of the Indian public. But during that competition, there were philosophical discourses and debates and whatever. But never did any Buddhist texts or Buddhist debates ever try to, take advantage of this fact and boast that he was a Hindu king who converted, and then as a Hindu king, he indulged in massacres and whatever, but after conversion, he became such a pious and peace-loving man, and that he spread peace. This is not there. They only mention of an Ashoka, who they say was very devout, but he was slightly fundamentalist too, because he did have a few Brahmins massacred, beheaded in Bengal, because they had desecrated some Buddhist texts. And so he shows that some bit of lack of tolerance on his part. And they also mention that he built 84,000 stupas across, and nothing else about his, rock edicts or about the Kalinga War, or none of those things. He is already a born Buddhist. And then the edicts themselves are, of course, very difficult to translate, and their translation, there are some variations, more or less, but people agree, historians agree to one version of it. But in those versions, you will find that he uses the word Devanampiya for himself. He doesn't anywhere mention Ashoka, though they have found one link to Ashoka somewhere through the text and the edict. Be that as it may, over all the edicts, there is no mention of himself calling himself Ashoka. He always calls himself as Devanampiya. Devanampiya means favorite of the gods. Now, as a Buddhist, calling himself favorite of the gods seems a little odd, because as favorite of the gods, he is kind of acknowledging there are many gods, which is not a tenet of Buddhism. In Buddhism, it is, in the end, the nothingness is the ultimate reality. And then, yes, they do had some anthropomorphic beings as their gods, but that was much later, and they're not as prominent that you will call yourself as, favorite of those. Either he could have called himself favorite of the Buddha or something like that, but no. He just called himself favorite of the gods. Devanampiya has done this, Devanampiya has done that. This is how he has more or less done this thing. So this raises the doubt that what is it? Why is it not possible that actually there could be two Ashokas? Two Ashokas we're talking of, because on the one hand we find that there is one Ashoka from the Mauryan dynasty who ruled at Rajagriha, who was a devout Buddhist, but then somewhat fundamentalist. He built a lot of stupas. He did not make any inscriptions, etc. And Kalinga was also already part of their empire. It was not that he had gone through any Kalinga warfare. Why? Because frankly, it doesn't make sense for a wise kingdom like Kalinga to wage a war against this huge empire that is next door to them. I mean, it doesn't make any sense, because massacre and elimination was absolutely guaranteed. However powerful or strong or economically viable or vibrant the Kalingans may have been. So the very fact that they waged war without making a compromise doesn't make sense. Whilst if we look at the possibility that we have the other Ashoka, the second Ashoka, and I must, of course, I will, in the end of this episode, you will find my acknowledgements to people like Vedveer Aryaji and certain others who have actually originally brought about this idea that the second Ashoka is one of the Gupta kings who also took on the title of Ashokaditya. So that could be the Ashoka that the scriptures and the edicts link up to an Ashoka at one place. And he is the one who also fought the Kalinga war, because if you see the Gupta Empire, it was not as large as the Mauryan Empire. The Gupta Empire was quite a large one in the north, but then they had the Kshatrapas to the west, and then they also had the Andharikas to the south, and they could also have had the Kalingas to their very immediate south of them, where they felt that there was to be a war, and then they did wage a war, and then they fought that, and that is why he is the one who wrote up the edicts. And if you translate the edicts, and you find that even in the edicts he doesn't really espouse Buddhism much. All that he's trying to do is saying non-violence, etc., all those kind of things. And he took over to Buddhism, but doesn't seem to be as devout, because he actually mentions there for people to accept all religions, etc., and all those kind of things. And he's also, one more important thing is that he, in spite of this, had waged some more battles after that. And this is known in history. So how do you reconcile an Ashoka who completely took to non-violence, and yet there are certain battles listed after Ashoka had conquered Kalinga? So this again will only match if there was a second Ashoka. So that is why you have one Ashoka from the Maurya dynasty, and the second Ashoka is Ashokaditya from the Gupta dynasty. And that Gupta dynasty Ashokaditya is the one which was roughly about 300 years before Christ. Again, the mainstream historians have completely got their datings wrong. We will talk about that some other time. Again, regarding this Ashoka, let us also look at what the folklore says, what are the legends, and what are people's memories. Let's look at that. If you go to modern day Patna, which is supposed to be the ancient Patliputra, and generally asked around as to the memories of Ashoka, he is still remembered as Chandashok. Chandashok means the cruel Ashok. So it is not a very flattering title for Ashoka the Great. And it is also believed that there are certain structures which they believe are his famous torture chambers. So this fact that there's a conflict between the kind of Ashok that we seem to get from history and the kind of Ashok that seems to reside in people's memory, there's a bit of a conflict. But then for now, we look at these two Ashokas as being available. One who was a devout Buddhist, built 84,000 stupas, and already had the kingdom that was right from Afghanistan to Kalinga to Bengal to Tamil Nadu. And then you had the other Ashoka under the Gupta Empire who annexed Kalinga after the big war, did get moved, and he did write up those edicts. And then, but still he, for statecraft purposes, he did wage some more wars. He was not as devoted Buddhist. He generally practiced and preached harmony, peace and harmony in his kingdom. So there's a very, very strong possibility that there are these two Ashokas, which we need to examine. Yes, those of you who are more serious historians can even examine this further. Those of you who are not can just keep it at the back of your mind and say that, all right, there's a possibility, keep it there. Thank you very much for listening to me. Cheers, guys. Bye.